I died. But it wasn't the end. From the flames that burned everything I knew, I rose carrying the weight of pain and a fire of anger that couldn't be extinguished. They thought I was weak, thought I'd always be the victim. They were wrong. The past gave me a second chance, a chance to face the ones who betrayed me. Secrets, lies, and twisted schemes surround me at every turn. It's a game they think they control, but this time, I'm ready to take the reins. Yet, it's not just them I have to fight. The fear and fury within me are battles of their own. Trust? It's a luxury I can't afford. Allies may come, but can I trust them, or are they just another part of the deceit? It doesn't matter. This time, I won't lose. This time, I'll rewrite my fate. Standing in the middle of the living room, my hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the flower arrangement on the dining table. Delicate white lilies, Daniel's favorite, or at least they used to be, adorned the centerpiece. The room smelled of fresh blooms and scented candles, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. Outwardly, everything exuded joy. A warm smile accompanied every meticulous adjustment to the party preparations. Inside, unease gnawed at my core. In recent months, Daniel had grown distant. The warmth in his gaze had faded, replaced by an almost hollow detachment. Small gestures of affection that once defined our relationship disappeared, leaving behind silence and unspoken tension. Tonight was meant to rekindle the spark, a celebration of love. Yet, as I scanned the guest list again, dread settled deep. His gaze lingered on me earlier, not with tenderness, but with something unamiable, a mix of kindness and something darker. Focusing on the guest list, my pen hovered over a few unfamiliar names, people Daniel insisted on inviting. Dread threatened to consume me, but logic intervened. Maybe they were colleagues or old friends. Surely, there was an explanation. The clock ticked, each second amplifying the growing knot in my stomach. Everything had to be perfect, not just to impress the guests but to salvage the fragile remnants of our marriage. A quick glance at the kitchen confirmed everything was in order. Yet, no amount of preparation could dispel the weight in the air, heavy, like a storm waiting to break. The creak of the front door broke my reverie. Daniel stepped in, tie askew, briefcase in hand. "Sorry, work ran late," he said casually, tone detached. Forcing a smile, I gestured toward the room. "You're just in time. Everything's ready." His gaze swept across the decor, and for a moment, approval flickered in his eyes. "You've outdone yourself," he said, resting a hand on my shoulder. But the warmth evaporated the moment he turned away, replaced by the familiar chill that now defined him. Later, as I arranged flowers on the dessert table, Daniel's phone buzzed on the counter. Before I could call out, he snatched it up. "I'll take this in the other room," he muttered, disappearing down the hall. Curiosity tugged at me. Who could be calling at this hour? My eyes lingered on the closed door, torn between the urge to follow and the fear of uncovering a truth I wasn't ready to face. Guests began arriving, filling the house with laughter and conversation. Daniel mingled with ease, charm fully intact, but his attention barely brushed me. Each time our eyes met, the gaze seemed to pass right through, as if I wasn't there. At one point, I noticed him on the balcony, posture tense, staring into the distance. Approaching hesitantly, my heels clicked softly on the floor, drawing his attention. He turned, expression unreadable, a mix of calculation and detachment. My heart sank deeper. As the evening wore on, the unease intensified. Names on the guest list, Daniel's evasive behavior, the mysterious phone call, they felt like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't assemble. When he slipped away again, phone pressed to his ear, I followed, heart pounding. Near the study, his voice carried in a low, urgent tone. "I told you, tonight isn't the time. We'll talk tomorrow. Just stick to the plan." Stick to the plan? My mind raced, each possibility more unsettling. As I turned to leave, something brushed my foot. A folded piece of paper lay partially hidden under the rug. Unfolding it with trembling hands, I read, "Meet me at the usual place. We can't afford any mistakes. Natalie." The name sent a chill through me. Natalie, who was she? What plan? Footsteps approached, and I hurried back to the kitchen, tucking the note into my pocket. Hands shook as I arranged trays, the weight of suspicion bearing down. Suddenly, a loud crash from the stove startled me. Flames erupted, licking at the cabinets above. Grabbing the fire extinguisher, I sprayed desperately until the fire subsided. Smoke filled the air, and murmurs of concern rippled from the living room. Guests peered in, eyes reflecting unease I couldn't dismiss. Frantically scanning the room, I searched for Daniel, but he was nowhere to be found. Calls to his phone went unanswered, each failed attempt deepening my fear. Finally, through the window, I spotted him in the garden with her. Natalie. They stood close, heads bent in hushed conversation. As if sensing my gaze, Daniel looked up. His expression was ice, devoid of warmth. Natalie's smirk as her hand brushed his arm twisted the knife further. The night dragged on, but the weight of betrayal loomed. Exhaustion overtook me as I climbed the stairs. Entering the bedroom, I froze. The faint crackle of flames reached my ears. The earlier fire hadn't been fully extinguished. Curtains ignited, flames spreading fast. Turning to flee, the door slammed shut, handle refusing to budge. Panic surged as I banged against the door, screams drowned by the chaos below. Through the window, their silhouettes stood motionless, watching the inferno with calm indifference. A sob tore free, my hands clutching my stomach. The life growing inside me became my only anchor. Grabbing a soaked blanket, I fought to shield against the heat. But the flames roared closer, relentless. Before darkness claimed me, I saw them one last time, Daniel and Natalie, side by side, untouched by the destruction they orchestrated. Betrayal's echo lingered as the world dissolved into silence. Darkness surrounded me as my eyes fluttered open. The air felt heavy, pressing down like an invisible weight, while an eerie silence suffocated every thought. A deep ache settled in my chest, a sorrow so profound it seemed to bleed into my very being. Yet, my body felt weightless, suspended in an unfeeling void. Was this real, or some cruel dream? The pain whispered otherwise. A faint glow pierced the darkness, distant yet unmistakable. Slowly, it grew brighter, beckoning with a quiet persistence. This wasn't just light, it carried a presence soothing yet enigmatic. Something deep within urged me to follow, as though it held answers to questions I didn't even know existed. Then it struck. The fire. Memories of searing heat and choking smoke flooded back, vivid and merciless. Flames devoured everything in their path while the sharp laughter of Daniel and Natalie echoed in my mind, cruel and haunting. The weight of betrayal crushed my chest, dragging me into a bottomless abyss of despair. For a fleeting moment, I saw him. My child. The one I would never hold. His image shimmered like a fragile dream before vanishing, leaving a gaping wound in its wake. Tears burned as guilt and fury churned in a relentless storm. Daniel had taken everything: my love, my trust, my future. Even the life growing inside me. A voice cut through the torment, deep and resonant, seemingly coming from nowhere yet everywhere at once. Do you wish to change your fate? My breath caught. The tone wasn't harsh or gentle, but it carried a weight that demanded an answer. Was this real, or had grief twisted reality beyond recognition? Doubt warred with hope as I hesitated, unable to ignore the faint spark of possibility. Fragments of my life played like a cruel, unrelenting film, sleepless nights spent patching a crumbling marriage, truths ignored in the name of love, and the ultimate betrayal that left me shattered. Every choice led here to this unbearable loss. Anger surged, not just at Daniel but at myself for being so blind. Yes, I whispered, voice raw and trembling. Then, louder, with every ounce of anguish and fury, yes. I want another chance. I want to take back what I lost. I want him to pay. The words echoed into the void, reverberating with a desperation that felt boundless. The light swelled, warm and overwhelming. Are you prepared to face the trials this choice demands? The voice asked, steady and unyielding. The path will be treacherous, fraught with temptation and pain. Your resolve will be tested. I'm ready, I replied, steadier now. A fire within burned hotter than any inferno. It wasn't just rage, it was determination. Daniel would not win. This wasn't the end of my story. A pause followed, heavy with meaning. The road ahead may be harder than death itself. Will you endure it? Yes, I said, no hesitation left. Whatever lay ahead, I would face it. For everything stolen, for the life extinguished before it began, I would fight. The light consumed me entirely, pulling me through space and time. Grief and despair ebbed, replaced by something foreign yet invigorating renewal. My body felt lighter, stronger, as though reshaped by unseen hands. In the distance, Daniel's laughter echoed, sharp and mocking. It wasn't just a memory but a reminder of the enemy I faced. My fists clenched, a silent vow forming in my heart. That laughter would die, silenced forever. The light blazed brighter, and I closed my eyes, surrendering to the transformation. Pain melted into resolve, fear into purpose. The Lara I once was betrayed and broken no longer existed. In her place stood someone unyielding, forged in the fire of vengeance. When my eyes opened, darkness was gone. The soft glow of a small dorm room greeted me, a place I hadn't seen in years. Turning toward the mirror on the wall, my breath hitched. Reflected back was a younger version of myself, radiant with life and possibility. Disbelief gave way to exhilaration as realization struck. This was my second chance. And this time, I wouldn't waste it. Waking up, I found myself in a familiar dorm room. My gaze wandered over the worn furniture and pale blue walls, landing on the old alarm clock blinking softly on the bedside table. Slowly, I raised a hand to my face, fingertips brushing against smooth, youthful skin, a stark contrast to the weary reflection etched in my memory. The realization hit like a wave, I was young again. Sliding out of bed, bare feet touched the cold floor, grounding me in this surreal moment. The desk was neatly stacked with textbooks I hadn't seen in years, relics of a life I thought was long gone. Nostalgia and disorientation collided, leaving me frozen in place. A deep breath steadied my racing thoughts, allowing the scene to sink in. Grabbing my phone from the nightstand, I flipped it open. The screen displayed the date 10 years ago. My hands shook, and the room seemed to tilt. How was this possible? I had been pulled back to a time before Daniel, before the betrayal, before the fire. Memories rushed in, unrelenting and vivid. Clutching the edge of the desk, I tried to steady myself against the tide of emotions. Pain lingered like an open wound, sharp and unyielding. Daniel's laughter and Natalie's smirk echoed in my mind, but something stronger pushed through hope. A chance to rewrite everything, to avoid the devastation. Turning to the mirror, I saw a younger version of myself staring back, vibrant and unscarred by the weight of betrayal. Yet, beneath the surface, the scars of my soul remained. Not this time, I whispered, voice low but resolute. The promise hung in the air, a vow to the reflection staring back. Determined to avoid old mistakes, I resolved to keep my distance from familiar faces in the dorm. There were some I remembered, friends, acquaintances, and a few who had brought nothing but trouble. This time, I wouldn't let anyone drag me into their chaos. Later that morning, the crisp autumn air nipped at my skin as I walked to class. That's when I saw him. Daniel. He looked just as I remembered, tall, confident, and effortlessly charming. Once, the sight of him might have quickened my pulse. Now, it stirred only disdain and a steely resolve. His easy smile lit up the group of students around him, but to me, it was a mask, one I could see through all too well. As I passed, his eyes found mine. Curiosity flickered in his gaze as he stepped closer, the familiar smile spreading across his face. Hi, I don't think we've met before. I'm Daniel. Meeting his gaze with cool detachment, I replied, Lara, and walked away without another word. His confusion lingered, but it brought me a grim satisfaction. He wasn't used to being dismissed, especially not by someone like me. In class, I slipped into a seat near the back, determined to stay unnoticed. My attention, however, soon drifted to someone else, Ethan. 2 rows ahead, he sat with his head bent over a notebook, dark hair slightly tousled. He had gone unnoticed before, but now something about his quiet focus drew me in. There was an intensity in his demeanor, a sharpness that intrigued me. At one point, his gaze lifted, meeting mine briefly as though sensing my curiosity. A quiet understanding reflected in his eyes, leaving me to wonder what he saw. Did he notice the walls I had carefully built, the secrets I carried? The lecture continued, though my thoughts remained divided. From the corner of my eye, I caught Daniel seated near the front, charming both the professor and his peers with ease. Watching him felt like studying an adversary, each movement calculated, each word rehearsed. This time, I vowed, he wouldn't ensnare me. During a group discussion, I was paired with Ethan. As we worked through the assignment, his thoughtful approach and quick grasp of the material caught my attention. "You have an interesting perspective," he said, offering a small, genuine smile. "Thanks," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Yet his sincerity left a mark. He wasn't like the others, and that both intrigued and unnerved me. Meanwhile, Daniel's attention had begun to shift. His eyes found me during breaks, lingering as if trying to decipher why I was different. My indifference threw him off balance, and I welcomed it. Let him wonder. That evening, I stood on the dormitory balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The air carried the faint scent of autumn leaves, crisp and grounding. Leaning against the railing, I made a silent vow. This time, history wouldn't repeat itself. I would be stronger, smarter, and unyielding. The journey to reclaim my life had only just begun. Morning brought a renewed sense of determination. The weight of past failures no longer dragged me down, instead, it fueled an unyielding resolve. The first step was reorganizing priorities, starting with the classes I had neglected before. This time, I would take charge of my future, no compromises. In class, Daniel took a seat nearby, his intention to capture my attention clear. Ignoring him completely, I focused on the lecture, watching as his confident smirk faltered ever so slightly. The subtle cracks in his demeanor were almost amusing, but there was no room for distractions. He could try as hard as he liked, it wouldn't work. Later, a study group session paired me with Ethan again. His meticulous approach to problem-solving stood out, a sharp contrast to the haphazard methods of others. Each detail mattered to him, and his quiet focus was nothing short of impressive. For the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of genuine appreciation for someone's company. Daniel, not one to be easily deterred, attempted to involve himself in my academic efforts. Offering help with a particularly challenging assignment, he seemed certain I would accept. Instead, I turned to Ethan, who readily assisted without any pretense. Daniel's reaction, a brief flicker of surprise followed by barely concealed frustration, was telling. His pride had taken a hit, and the satisfaction that came with it was undeniable. Ethan began noticing things about me that others might overlook. My grasp of concepts extended beyond what the textbooks covered, a detail that didn't escape his sharp observation. Though he never voiced his curiosity, thoughtful glances hinted at unspoken questions. During a break, I confided in Ethan about my academic goals. "This time, I'm taking control of my life," I said firmly. "No one else decides my path anymore." His response wasn't just polite interest, his eyes reflected a deep understanding, as if he knew exactly what those words meant. Daniel, undeterred by earlier rejections, organized a casual gathering and extended an invitation. Declining without hesitation, I used my studies as an excuse. The disbelief on his face was almost gratifying, it was likely the first time someone had dismissed him so easily. When Ethan invited me to an extracurricular event, I hesitated before agreeing, hoping for a distraction and a chance to maintain distance from Daniel. Surprisingly, the evening felt refreshing. Ethan's company, genuine and unassuming, made it easy to momentarily forget the bitterness that had consumed me. The calm didn't last. Daniel appeared at the event, his charm in full display. Approaching with his usual confidence, he tried steering me aside for a private conversation. Refusing outright, I returned to Ethan and our group, leaving Daniel visibly frustrated. It didn't matter. My choices were no longer his concern. Later that evening, Ethan shared parts of his own journey, the pressures of family expectations and his struggle to carve out an independent path. His honesty struck a chord, resonating deeply. For the first time, there was a sense of connection with someone who understood the fight to reclaim control over life. The contrast between Ethan and Daniel became strikingly clear. Where one sought to manipulate and dominate, the other offered respect and quiet strength. It was a revelation that bolstered my resolve and reminded me of what truly mattered. Unwilling to back down, Daniel devised another plan to regain my attention, feigning difficulty with a group project. When he asked for help, I declined once more, suggesting Ethan as a better fit. The look of confusion and irritation that crossed his face was priceless. That night, an anonymous note slipped under my dorm door. The message, written in a menacing tone and unfamiliar handwriting, warned me to stay away from Daniel. Instinct pointed to Natalie, arriving in the picture earlier than expected. The thought sent a chill down my spine, but it wasn't enough to deter me. Sitting by the dorm window, I gazed at the stars scattered across the night sky. The road ahead promised challenges, filled with treachery and uncertainty. But this time, fear didn't take hold. Determination burned brighter than ever. Daniel, Natalie, or anyone else who tried to control my fate would find themselves facing someone stronger, someone unbreakable. Daniel began to notice the stark change in Lara. The attention he once took for granted was gone, replaced by a cool indifference that bruised his pride. Her aloofness only deepened his fascination, leaving him frustrated and confused, drawn to her in ways he couldn't explain. Meanwhile, Lara found solace in the library. The quiet sanctuary became her retreat, a place to focus and rebuild. One afternoon, while immersed in her notes, Ethan appeared, handing over a resource she hadn't realized she needed for an assignment. The thoughtful gesture caught her off guard, sparking a flicker of genuine gratitude, a rare emotion she hadn't felt in a long time. Elsewhere on campus, Natalie made an unexpected appearance. Her presence carried a quiet menace, her cold gaze briefly locking onto Lara from across the quad. But as she approached Daniel, her demeanor shifted. The chill melted into warmth, a facade that masked the sharp edge of her intentions. Ethan noticed Natalie's watchful eyes trailing Lara. Pulling her aside, he offered a quiet warning. "She's keeping tabs on you," he said. Lara only smiled, her voice calm but resolute. "Let her. I'm ready for anything." During a group study session, Natalie's calculated remarks grew bolder, each one laced with subtle provocation. Hints of past secrets dangled like bait, but Lara refused to rise to it. Her measured responses betrayed none of the simmering anger, though clenched fists under the table told another story. Later, Daniel extended an invitation for lunch, seeking a private moment to reconnect. Without hesitation, Lara declined. The blunt refusal left him momentarily stunned, doubt flickering in his eyes as he began to question whether her feelings for him had changed. Natalie, ever the opportunist, seized the moment to manipulate Daniel further. In a private meeting, she planted seeds of suspicion, suggesting Lara's attention might be drifting elsewhere. Her words, carefully chosen, stoked the flames of jealousy and reignited his determination to uncover the truth. One evening, hidden in the shadows of a quiet hallway, Lara overheard a heated exchange between Daniel and Natalie. Fragments of their conversation revealed Natalie's schemes were already in motion, threads of chaos woven to destabilize her life once more. Ethan's invitation to a school music event came as a welcome distraction. Though hesitant at first, Lara accepted, hoping to escape the tangled web of her past. The evening brought unexpected lightness. Laughter came easier, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to enjoy the moment. Ethan's easygoing nature made the weight of her burdens momentarily fade. The mood shifted abruptly when Daniel arrived uninvited. His presence disrupted the event, and he wasted no time pulling Lara aside. Before the confrontation could escalate, Ethan intervened. Standing firm, his calm resolve clashed with Daniel's simmering frustration. The tension was palpable, and Lara felt a surge of gratitude for Ethan's unwavering support. Natalie, unwilling to be outdone, spread whispers across campus. Rumors painted Lara as someone toying with both Daniel and Ethan, fueling gossip among their peers. Though shaken, Lara's resolve remained unbroken. The next day, a chance encounter with Natalie in a school hallway brought the tension to a head. Feigning innocence, Natalie laced her words with veiled threats, reminding Lara that the shadows of the past could never be fully outrun. Lara's glare, sharp and unyielding, spoke volumes, her silence a far more powerful weapon than any retort. Determined to uncover the truth about Daniel and Natalie's connection, Lara began her own investigation. The pieces she unearthed painted a far more tangled history than she'd anticipated, a web of manipulation and deceit that left her shaken. Back in the dorm that night, Lara confided in Ethan, sharing her discoveries and fears. He listened without judgment, his calm presence grounding her spiraling thoughts. "You have the power to change this," he said gently. "But you'll have to face it head-on and fight for what matters." His words sparked something inside, a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. For the first time, Lara felt she wasn't alone. Ethan's unwavering belief gave her the strength to stand taller, ready to confront the shadows threatening to consume her. Ethan approached after class, his usual calm tinged with urgency. "I want to help you deal with Daniel and Natalie," he said, catching me off guard. Hesitation crept in for a moment. Could he really be trusted? But deep down, it was clear facing their schemes alone wasn't an option. A small nod signaled my agreement. In a quiet corner of the library, Ethan shared something unexpected. "I noticed you the first day you walked into class. You stood out not because you tried to, but because you were different. You kept your distance, but there was a presence about you." The confession startled me. Being seen like that wasn't something I was used to, though my expression remained neutral, unsure how to respond. We began crafting a strategy to handle Daniel. Ethan suggested exploiting his curiosity, using it to draw him out and expose his intentions. The idea had merit, and together, a subtle plan took shape, designed to manipulate the dynamics around him. During a study group, Ethan casually mentioned an upcoming campus event, setting the stage. Picking up on his intent, I steered the conversation toward Daniel, dropping hints guaranteed to pique his interest. The tactic worked. The group's attention shifted, feeding his ever-present need to be the center of everything. It didn't take long for Daniel to notice the growing connection between Ethan and me. Discomfort flickered in the way his gaze lingered, jaw tightening slightly. It was only a matter of time before he acted. Meanwhile, Natalie summoned Daniel to a coffee shop, masking her intentions with polite pretense. "You underestimate her," she said, tone dripping with condescension. "I know more about Lara than you think." The cryptic words hinted at secrets yet to be uncovered, deepening the layers of their alliance. Ethan, always a step ahead, dug into Natalie's past. His search led to an old photograph buried in the school archives, evidence of a scandal that had led to her expulsion years ago, a carefully concealed part of her history. The confrontation with Natalie came in the middle of campus. Cutting remarks laced with venom failed to rattle me. Composed and sharp, I delivered retorts that left her visibly shaken. For once, the upper hand slipped from her grasp. Later that week, Ethan took me to a secluded library on the outskirts of town. Among the dusty shelves, he uncovered a file detailing Daniel's family's questionable business dealings. The revelations were chilling, adding another layer of darkness to the picture, but they only strengthened my resolve. Despite the growing trust between us, I kept Ethan at a distance. Protecting him from the fallout of my vendetta felt necessary, though his presence offered a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. Unbeknownst to either of us, Daniel overheard part of our conversation in the library. The fragment deepened his suspicions, and the storm brewing in his eyes was impossible to ignore. It was clear he wouldn't remain idle for long. A formal invitation to the school gala arrived, courtesy of Daniel. Ethan cautioned it might be a trap, but avoiding confrontation wasn't an option anymore. This needed to end. Before the event, Ethan pulled me aside. "If you need backup, I'll be there," he said, sincerity breaking through the usual calm. For the first time in years, the weight of my struggles felt lighter, even if just for a moment. The gala unfolded in a whirlwind of glittering lights and whispered conversations. Natalie arrived in a striking gown, commanding attention with calculated ease. Sidling up to me, her voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "I know what you're up to," she said, every word dripping with malice. Standing firm, I refused to let her intimidation take hold. Leaving the event early, my thoughts swirled with the night's encounters. Outside, Ethan waited, a folder in hand, his expression serious. "I found something," he said, handing it over. Inside were documents linking Daniel and Natalie to financial corruption within the school. The pieces of their puzzle were finally falling into place. Natalie made her grand entrance at the campus seminar, introducing herself as one of the event's co-organizers. Her commanding presence, coupled with striking looks and a confident demeanor, left a lasting impression on the audience. Applause echoed through the room, but beneath the surface of her charm lay a calculated precision. Every move was deliberate. From a distance, I observed her carefully. The way she carried herself, the subtle shifts in tone, the fleeting glances cast around the room, everything about her exuded pretense. Beneath the polished facade lurked an undercurrent of manipulation. The battle was no longer brewing, it had begun. Daniel wasted no time aligning himself. Approaching Natalie with practiced ease, he engaged her in conversation, their interaction deliberate and public. The connection between them was undeniable, their alliance unmistakable. The display wasn't just for show, it was designed to unsettle me. And it worked. Ethan, ever watchful, had been quietly tracking Natalie's movements. His efforts led him to a small coffee shop on the edge of campus, where she frequently met with unfamiliar individuals. Their hushed tones and secretive behavior hinted at something significant, though their exact plans remained unclear. At the library, I joined a study session only to find Natalie among the participants. Her smile, unreadable and calculated, preceded the suggestion that we pair up for the assignment. The tension between us was tangible. Every word she spoke carried a hidden barb, designed to test my composure. Refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction, I stayed calm, though my resolve felt stretched thin. Her remarks grew sharper as the session progressed, veiled insinuations hinting at secrets she claimed I was hiding. My grip tightened on the pen, but I held firm. Showing frustration would only fuel her game. Ethan arrived just as the tension peaked. His calm, composed demeanor redirected the conversation, diffusing the moment. A brief glance his way conveyed my gratitude, though no words were exchanged. Later, Daniel approached under the guise of concern, his questions thinly veiled attempts to extract information. Responding with icy indifference, I watched his frustration grow. Whatever game he played, I wasn't about to let him win. That evening, an envelope appeared in my dorm room. Inside was a threatening message accompanied by a photograph of me at a previous event. The warning was clear, Natalie was making her move. Sharing the letter with Ethan, we scrutinized every detail. A single clue stood out, a deliberate slip meant to lure me into a trap. Instead of falling for it, we devised a plan to turn the tables. An exclusive party organized by Natalie followed. Invitations were extended to select students, excluding me, a calculated taunt impossible to ignore. Ethan, however, received an invite and agreed to attend, armed with questions and the strategy we had crafted together. At the party, Natalie's attempts to charm Ethan were as transparent as they were persistent. He remained composed, using the opportunity to glean information from other attendees. His focus and restraint underscored the loyalty that had become his defining trait. Meanwhile, my research in the school archives led to a damning discovery. Hidden among forgotten files was evidence linking Natalie to a financial scandal at her previous institution. The documents were incriminating, their weight undeniable. This was a piece of the puzzle that could finally expose her true nature. Ethan's vigilance paid off during the party when he stumbled upon Natalie and Daniel meeting in secret in an empty classroom. From a hidden vantage point, he recorded their conversation, capturing every word. Their discussion revealed a plan to discredit me and tarnish my reputation across campus. It was the proof we needed. The pieces were falling into place, and the stakes had never been higher. But this time, I wasn't alone. With Ethan by my side, the odds were shifting. Whatever Natalie and Daniel had in store, I was ready to face it head-on. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen, demanding a meeting at a secluded location to discuss something crucial about Daniel and Natalie. Every instinct screamed it was a trap, but curiosity refused to let it go unanswered. Asking Ethan to follow discreetly, I prepared for whatever lay ahead. The meeting point, surrounded by tall, shadowy trees, was eerily quiet. Natalie appeared, her confidence as sharp as ever, a folder clutched in her hand. With a smirk, she waved the documents. "This," she began, "is proof that you embezzled funds from the school's charity." With this, I can destroy your reputation. Staying calm, I scrutinized the situation. Her accusations were flimsy, full of holes. Your story doesn't add up, Natalie, I said evenly, pointing out inconsistencies to stall. Every moment bought time for Ethan, who was recording the exchange from his hidden vantage point. Before she could respond, Daniel stepped out of the shadows. Betrayal etched across his face, he wasted no time siding with her. You've crossed the line, Lara, he said accusingly. I trusted you, and this is how you repay me. The hypocrisy stung, but reacting would only give him power. A buzz from my phone broke the tension. Ethan had sent the audio recording of our conversation so far. With a quick setup, I played it aloud. Natalie's words echoed in the clearing, her schemes laid bare. Momentarily speechless, she faltered. Recovering quickly, her voice turned venomous. Of course, you'd stoop to using Ethan, she sneered. Manipulating him like you do with everyone else. The recording planted seeds of doubt in Daniel. His confident facade began to crack as he turned to her, suspicion clouding his expression. What else haven't you told me? He demanded. Panic flared in Natalie's eyes, and in a moment of desperation, she blurted a startling confession. Once, she had been in love with Daniel, only to realize he had used her for his schemes. Her resentment toward him, combined with her anger at me, fueled the vendetta she had been pursuing. Seizing the moment, I pulled Daniel aside. She's dangerous, I warned. If you keep aligning with her, you'll lose everything. The words seemed to register, but his bruised ego wouldn't let him concede. Instead, he made his choice. Standing beside Natalie, he vowed to bring me down. You won't win, Lara, he said, his voice cold and resolute. Ethan found me after the confrontation, his steady presence a much-needed anchor. You don't have to do this alone, he said softly, the sincerity in his voice cutting through the chaos. For the first time in what felt like ages, I felt less alone. Determined, I began organizing the evidence Ethan and I had gathered. The files and recordings painted a damning picture of Natalie and Daniel's corruption. The time had come to expose the truth. A meeting with the school administration was arranged, and the groundwork was set. Anticipating retaliation, Natalie and Daniel concocted a diversion to disrupt the meeting. But their tactics had been anticipated, and a contingency plan was already in place. When the moment came, the evidence was presented to the school board and several key students. The room fell silent as the truth unraveled, each revelation dismantling their web of deceit. Just as resolution seemed within reach, Natalie made a desperate play. Unveiling a deeply personal secret from my past, she attempted to shift the narrative and sow chaos. The room buzzed with shock, but before she could gain traction, Ethan stepped forward with the final piece of evidence, a document that obliterated Natalie's credibility entirely. The weight of the revelations sank in, murmurs spreading through the room as the extent of their schemes became undeniable. Natalie and Daniel's plans had finally collapsed, leaving them with nowhere to hide. Victory, however hard-won, was finally within reach. After the meeting, the school board called me into a private discussion. Commending the bravery it took to present the evidence, they assured me the matter would be thoroughly investigated. Their support was reassuring, but it was clear this was only the beginning. Meanwhile, tensions between Daniel and Natalie erupted into a heated argument. What began as a discussion about their failure quickly devolved into blame shifting. Their once solid alliance began to fracture, cracks forming in the fragile partnership. That evening, an anonymous message arrived from a student, containing details about Natalie's illicit financial dealings. The information was damning, a crucial piece of the puzzle. Hands trembling, I absorbed every word, realizing this could be the final nail in her coffin. Ethan and I reviewed the new details together. Natalie had embezzled funds from the school's charity account, diverting the money to finance her personal schemes. The magnitude of her deception was staggering, leaving us both stunned. Yet, disbelief quickly gave way to determination. This was the leverage needed to expose her completely. Feeling the walls close in, Daniel approached me directly. Contrition colored his tone as he apologized, attempting to shift all blame onto Natalie. She manipulated me, he insisted, desperation lacing his words. But the excuse rang hollow. Meeting his gaze, I stood firm. "You're just as responsible as she is," I said, voice steady. For the first time, there was no fear, no hesitation. His apology, however desperate, could never undo the damage he'd caused. Desperation drove Natalie to spread malicious rumors across campus, her attempts to discredit me growing increasingly erratic. But her credibility was already unraveling. After the meeting, students began questioning her motives and integrity, the tide of opinion slowly turning. Ethan proposed hosting a public forum to present the remaining evidence. The idea was risky, but it felt necessary to solidify trust and dismantle Natalie's lies once and for all. Reluctantly, I agreed. At the forum, every document was laid out with meticulous clarity. Ethan stood by my side, his steady presence offering reassurance. The room fell silent as the truth unfolded, skepticism giving way to understanding. For the first time, I felt the weight of the student body shifting in my favor. A former ally of Natalie's stood up, visibly shaken. She confessed to being coerced into aiding Natalie's schemes, revealing how manipulation and threats had kept her silent. Her testimony was damning, leaving Natalie with little room for defense. Pressure mounted on Daniel as both the administration and Natalie turned against him. She threatened to expose his secrets if he didn't support her, but his position was already crumbling. Each revelation stripped away his defenses. Ethan's relentless efforts uncovered additional financial records, including a transaction that directly tied Daniel to Natalie's illicit activities. The evidence was undeniable, a link that sealed his culpability. Confronting Daniel again, I held nothing back. "You can't keep running," I said firmly. "It's time to face the consequences of your choices." His silence spoke louder than any argument, resignation etched across his face. Isolated and desperate, Natalie announced a last-ditch press conference to salvage her reputation. But her move wasn't unexpected. Ethan and I had anticipated this and prepared accordingly. When the press conference began, we arrived with the full arsenal of evidence. Standing beside Ethan, I addressed the gathered crowd, meticulously presenting the findings. The dark truths of Natalie and Daniel's actions unraveled in stark detail. Shock rippled through the room as every lie was dismantled. By the end, there was nothing left for them to hold onto. Their reputations lay in ruins, their influence irreparably shattered. Victory was hard won, but at last, the truth had prevailed. After the press conference, Natalie vanished from campus, leaving behind a cloud of speculation about her next move. Something felt off. Ethan and I decided to dig deeper, certain she wouldn't retreat without a plan. Meanwhile, Daniel spiraled into panic. Calls to Natalie went unanswered, each attempt amplifying his sense of abandonment. Vulnerable and cornered, he resolved to save himself, even if it meant turning against her. One afternoon, an anonymous invitation arrived, instructing me to meet at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The cryptic message set off alarms, but the choice to confront whatever lay ahead felt inevitable. Ethan insisted on shadowing me, his quiet determination a constant reassurance. The warehouse loomed in eerie silence, dimly lit by flickering bulbs. Natalie emerged from the shadows, flanked by men I didn't recognize. Her voice was cold, cutting through the stillness. "This is your last chance to back down, Lara. Walk away now, or face the consequences." Stepping forward, I met her gaze without hesitation. "I'm not afraid of you, Natalie. Whatever you're planning, I'll see it through to the end." Her smirk deepened as she revealed her true intentions, a calculated revenge aimed at destroying both Ethan and me. Hidden in the shadows, Ethan recorded the entire exchange, phone ready to broadcast everything if the situation escalated. Though tension thickened the air, his presence was a quiet source of strength. To my surprise, Daniel appeared, looking worn and conflicted. Coerced back to Natalie's side, he pleaded, claiming to be a victim in her schemes. But desperation colored his words, and they held no weight. The truth of his actions was all too clear. Natalie's voice cut through the tension, laced with bitterness. She confessed the root of her vendetta. Daniel's betrayal had left her bitter and vengeful. "I don't care about anyone anymore," she said icily. "Not even him." A decision loomed, offer Daniel a chance at redemption or expose him completely, ensuring his downfall. The weight of the choice settled heavily, resolve hardening as I considered the consequences. Ethan stepped into the light, raising his phone. "It's over, Natalie. We have everything we need to bring you down." Her fury erupted as she ordered her men to attack. Chaos descended. Fighting to defend ourselves, we searched for a way out amid the violence. In a moment of inner conflict, Daniel turned against Natalie. Joining the fray, he helped fend off her group, regret evident in every move. His actions spoke of a desire to make amends, even if true forgiveness felt out of reach. Sirens shattered the chaos. The police, tipped off by Ethan's earlier messages, arrived in force. Natalie and her accomplices were quickly subdued and arrested, their elaborate scheme brought to an abrupt end. As officers led her away in handcuffs, Natalie shot me a venomous glare. "This isn't over," she hissed, her words lingering in the air. Silence was my only response, a profound sense of relief washing over me. Later, Ethan and I sat on the warehouse steps, the cool night air wrapping around us. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself breathe. "I couldn't have done this without you," I admitted softly. His smile was warm, steady, and in that quiet moment, a deeper connection began to form, one built on trust, resilience, and shared strength. After Natalie's arrest, the evidence was presented to the school administration, detailing the full extent of her and Daniel's wrongdoings. The board expressed gratitude for the courage it took to bring everything to light, assuring that justice would follow. Daniel soon faced the school's disciplinary council. Standing before them, he admitted his mistakes and accepted the consequences. During a public apology, he turned to me, his voice trembling with regret as he expressed his remorse. Later, we met privately. He tried to explain himself further, but his words were met with calm detachment. "I've let it go," I said simply, my tone resolute. It wasn't forgiveness, it was closure. In that moment, we both found a sense of freedom. To lift the weight of recent events, Ethan planned a small countryside picnic. The peaceful setting provided a welcome escape. Sitting on the grass under a clear sky, we spoke of the future with a sense of hope that felt new. "I used to be consumed by revenge," I admitted, the words feeling lighter than expected. "But now I see that what truly matters is finding real happiness and living a meaningful life." A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying finally lifted. Ethan shared his own news, an offer to work as a research assistant at a prestigious university. "I'm worried about leaving," he confessed. "I don't want to make things harder for you." Encouraging him with a smile, I said, "If we're important to each other, distance won't matter." My assurance seemed to ease his hesitation, and quiet pride filled me at the thought of supporting him. Daniel left the school shortly after, leaving behind a letter. In it, he expressed hope that one day I might forgive him and find the happiness he had taken from me. Folding it away without a second thought, I felt no need to dwell on the past. Closure had already come. As the semester drew to a close, Ethan and I spent as much time together as possible, savoring the calm after the storm. Our bond deepened naturally, shifting from friendship into something more profound, though words felt unnecessary to define it. An unexpected invitation arrived, a chance to join a community project focused on supporting underprivileged students. The opportunity to create something meaningful felt like a sign, a new chapter waiting to begin. At the school's farewell ceremony, I stood before the crowd, sharing the journey that had brought me here. "We all face darkness," I said, my voice steady. "But it's in choosing to rise that we find the light." The applause that followed wasn't just for me, it was for everyone who had ever fought to overcome their struggles. Afterward, Ethan surprised me with a gift, a hand-painted portrait of me standing firm during the press conference against Natalie. His artistic talent and the thoughtfulness behind the gesture left me speechless. Accepting the painting with a grateful smile, I said softly, "You've always been there." The depth of his support, unwavering through everything, suddenly felt more tangible. The final moment unfolded on the school's rooftop as dawn painted the horizon. Standing at the edge, I let the warm sunlight wash over me, eyes closed as a deep sense of peace settled within. For the first time in years, I felt ready to embrace the future. Ethan joined me, his presence steady and reassuring. "Whatever path you choose, I'll always be here," he said, his voice filled with quiet certainty. Turning to him, my smile was soft but genuine. Together, we stepped forward, ready to embrace the journey ahead.